name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and the Spirit who is our companion. Amen. A key moment in today's gospel is when the parent in the story says, "I believe, help my unbelief." Now we say, "We believe," every time we recite the creed. What exactly do we mean by believe? Some of us are recovering from religious systems that are all about answers, doctrines, and dogmas that were rammed down our throats. We were told what to think and what to do. And if we bought into that system, we became religious automatons. Afraid, terrified to think for ourselves. But the illusion of certainty cracks when what we are told simply does not match up with our experience. For example, we're told to join in condemning what others are so happy to call sinners, so happy to judge. Women daring to seek control over our own bodies. Trans people claiming their truest identity. Or disparaging historically disadvantaged people who have the temerity to demand their voices to be heard. Fellow children of God dismissed as sinners? That's just outrageous, and it's just wrong. It's wrong because it defies the truth. And if we're told to condemn all these supposed sinners, what about the sinner in us? Must we condemn ourselves when the Jesus of the Gospels showers all people with love? These are uncomfortable, perhaps inconvenient questions to ask ourselves. But if we are willing to ask them and listen for the truth, our world suddenly expands. And with that, our sense of who and what God is takes on new meaning. No angry old man in the sky, almost eager to punish people crossing arbitrary cultural lines. Instead, we encounter a loving parent who, like the prodigal father in Luke's story, runs out to us to forgive and embrace us. This transition from one view of God to the other represents a religious growing up, which is sometimes painful, certainly disconcerting at moments, when our rules and restrictions, familiar as they were, don't fit up with what we know is true. We're left learning to live with ambiguity, to learn with not knowing. We learn to trust instead, to trust our relationship with God and one another as we continue to be amazed by our evolving understanding. I'll never forget a sermon I heard when I was a young priest at St. Mark's Church, Capitol Hill. The rector at the time, Jim Adams, was talking about the Latin word for the credo, which he said was related to the original Greek word cardia, which we recognize as having to do with the heart. Jim's point was that belief and believing had nothing to do with immutable precepts and certainties. Believing is a matter of where we place our hearts, our deepest trust, our devotion to one another and to God. I read a story about a woman, let's call her Rachel, coming to grips with her ability to see patterns in events before they were ever obvious to anyone else. Now, this put her in conflict with her father, who was a rather dogmatic scientist. Her father absolutely refused to acknowledge anything not confirmed by empirical evidence. Rachel despaired of ever having a relationship with her father while being true to herself. But she finally realized that there was another way. She could honor and love her father, but on her terms. She didn't have to be confined by his narrow view of human experience. She could claim her ability to see beyond the physical appearance of things, to sense a spiritual dimension she knew can never be quantified. Rachel allowed herself to feel grateful for who she was, who God made her to be, and for the gifts she had been given. And she allowed herself to love her father despite his fixed opinions, and to be grateful for the relationship she hoped they could still build together. And maybe that's the true measure of believing. Gratitude. Being grateful for our lives. Grateful for neighbors we know and neighbors we are yet to know. And grateful, most of all, that we can believe our way to God in our hearts. Amen.